Years after the invasion, Earth was visited by alien creatures that humans could not kill because these aliens had the power to reverse time by a day, which allowed them to stay alive despite being killed repeatedly. Now, they had started to eliminate all the people on Earth. However, there was a man among the soldiers who was quite weak compared to others. During the war, he acquires the power of an alien, which allows him to also reverse time by a day. The question now is whether he will be able to use this power against the dangerous aliens, or if the aliens will continue to kill him repeatedly. This needs to be figured out as soon as possible. At the beginning of the story, we are introduced to an officer named Rick, who is called by the head of the largest military in London. Recently, a very dangerous alien attack had occurred on Earth, leading all the country's military forces to unite. Now, the head of the military was asking Colonel Kills to join the war. However, Colonel Kills had no training in military combat, so he had no idea how to fight in the war. Consequently, Colonel Kills refuses to join the war. But Colonel's intentions did not seem right because he needed to find a way to escape. As he was about to leave, some of Colonel's men gave him an electric shock and rendered him unconscious. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in a very large military base, which was the same place where all the country's military forces had gathered and were preparing to attack the aliens. An officer arrived at this place and looked at him strangely, constantly informing him that he was not a soldier, but an officer. Therefore, he should be kept away from the war that was to happen the next day. However, Colonel Kills had sent a letter with a cage, clearly stating that he was a fugitive and should be given rigorous training so that he could help the soldiers in the war. Consequently, the officer did not trust any of his further words. The officer took him to his military base and did not give him the kit, threatening that if Colonel Kills escaped, he would not spare any of them. This meant that Colonel Kills could not leave the military base. The next day, all the soldiers prepared for the battle. They had donned robotic suits that provided them with immense power. But he had no idea about the robotic machines because he had never practiced using them. He kept asking others how to operate the machine. Eventually, they all reached the place where the fight with the aliens was happening. The military had sent many planes to that location. However, when Rick and his team arrived, their plane was attacked by the aliens, causing everyone to descend. Rick also started moving towards the area where the alien creators were killing all the soldiers. These aliens, known as mimics, had come from space to Earth and had now started attacking the companions of the alien creators. Despite having powerful robotic armor, the soldiers could not withstand the aliens. The aliens were determined to kill them, and Rick was unable to operate the machine effectively, so he couldn't fire at the aliens. However, Rick eventually learned how to fire the weapon and managed to defeat an alien. This was surprising because Rick had managed to kill a dangerous alien creature without any training in his first battle. But at the very next moment, a new, much larger and different alien appeared. The villain started attacking without wasting any time. In an effort to save himself, Rick threw a grenade at the alien, which caused the alien to explode. However, Rick was killed in the blast, and alien blood filled his body. In the next moment, when Rick opened his eyes, he found himself back at the military base where he had arrived the day before. He could not understand what was happening to him, but as he moved forward, everything seemed to repeat as it had the previous day. It felt like he was dreaming. Rick was back on the battlefield where the aliens had attacked everyone. The shocking part was that the soldiers were dying in the same manner as before, and the large aliens had killed Rick again. Immediately after, Rick opened his eyes at the military base once more. An officer kicked Rick awake. It was then that Rick began to understand that he was trapped in a loop. Every time he died, he would return to the same place. He tried to explain this to the officers, but unfortunately, no one believed him. So, he was back in the same battle once again. This time, he saved his fellow soldiers because he already knew who was going to die and how. However, he couldn't save himself, as the events kept repeating. He would die at the hands of the aliens, and then come back the next day to fight them again. This cycle continued many times. One day, while fighting the creatures, Rick saw a woman named Rita, who was quite famous among the soldiers because she had single-handedly killed many creatures. But now, Rita was repeatedly dying in front of Rick. So, Rick decided to help Rita and kept fighting the aliens. Rita was stunned to see Rick because fighting the alien creatures was not something anyone could handle. In fact, Rick had died so many times and come back that he knew exactly when each creature would attack. Rita asked Rick to meet her after he revived, but just then, the aliens attacked again, killing both Rita and Rick. Once more, Rick opened his eyes in the same place. Soon after, he reached Captain Rita, but Rita had no memory of anything. Rick told her that they had met the previous day and that she had asked him to meet her during the battle. Hearing this, Rita was puzzled. She then took Rick to a scientist who had conducted extensive research on the aliens. The scientist explained everything to Rick, revealing that the alien creatures were not ordinary. They were all connected to a huge structure, which was essentially their collective mind. The scientist had named this large structure Omega, and whenever a creature died, a direct signal was sent to Omega. He then reverses the entire day again, causing the aliens to come back to life. This time, he knows how the aliens die and can protect himself accordingly. When he had previously killed an alien creature, its blood had entered his body, and now whenever he died, Omega thought that Rick was one of its creatures, causing it to restart the day. This is why Rick kept coming back to life. Rick was puzzled by how they knew so much. Rita explained that she had the same powers because she had killed a creature whose blood had entered her body. However, Rita no longer had these powers. Now Rick began to understand everything. Rita told him that the only way to stop Omega was to destroy the large Omega structure, which was connected to all the creators. Rick would eventually sense Omega's location, but until then, he would have to keep dying. Rita told Rick that no matter how hard he tried, he could not escape the battle because he was not a soldier and did not know how to fight. Therefore, Rita decided to train Rick so he could reach Omega and destroy it. The next day, hardcore training began, with Rita giving him various tasks, which he was failing repeatedly. Once, while training, Rick got injured. Rita made it clear that if he got injured, he should not receive blood transfusions because it would transfer all his powers to Omega, preventing it from reviving him after death. Rita had lost her powers in a similar way. She had been injured during training, and when she opened her eyes, the military had given her a blood transfusion, which caused her powers to be transferred. Therefore, Rita would kill Rick if he was injured, to prevent his powers from being transferred to Omega. This cycle repeated with increasing intensity. One day, Rick had visions of Omega and shared these with Rita and the scientist. They needed to find a way to exit the battlefield and reach Omega's location. They finally reached the place where Omega was kept so they could destroy it. However, things were not as simple as they seemed. Whenever Rick tried to avoid the aliens with Rita, the aliens ultimately managed to kill him. This had been happening for a whole month, and during this time, Rick had fallen in love with Rita, although Rita was unaware of his feelings. After several days of hard work, Rick and Rita managed to escape the major battle and reach the location where Omega was kept. But their vehicle ran out of fuel on the way, forcing them to stop. They took refuge in a desolate house. Rita had sustained a minor injury during the battle, and Rick tended to her wounds. He even made coffee for Rita, but when she went to drink it, Rick pointed out that she had used 2 sugar packets instead of 1. This realization made Rita remember that they had been in this place before, though Rick had never mentioned it. To avoid wasting time, Rita decided they should leave and head for the helicopter parked behind the house. She wanted to use it to continue their journey, but Rick warned her that starting the helicopter would attract the aliens, who would come to destroy them. Despite this, Rita was determined to find and destroy Omega, so she started the helicopter and took off. However, alien creatures arrived at their location and quickly destroyed the helicopter. Rita was on the verge of dying, and when Rick checked on her, he was also attacked by the creatures. Rick found himself back in the same place, having witnessed Rita's repeated deaths throughout this journey. He no longer wanted Rita to die, so he decided to search for Omega alone. During the battle, he evaded everyone and made his way out, using the helicopter to head towards Omega's location. After some time, he finally arrived at the destination. But instead of finding Omega, he encountered creatures connected to Omega. The creatures realized that Rick had acquired powers similar to theirs, so they attacked him with the intent to kill. To escape, Rick jumped into the water, committing suicide so he could return to the previous day. He then informed Rita and the scientist about everything, including the visions he had of Omega. It turned out that these were the creature's tricks to capture and kill him. The biggest question now is how to find Omega's exact location. The scientists then revealed that he had a device that could determine Omega's exact location if attached to their creatures. However, they had no creatures available for testing. The device could also be tested using Rick's blood, which contained the creature's essence. But the machine had been seized by the Colonel, who had sent Rick to the battle. Rick and Rita quickly went to the Colonel and managed to intimidate him into handing over the machine. However, as they were leaving, the Colonel's men attacked them. The two of them fled quickly, and Rita inserted the device into Rick's body, revealing Omega's exact location. But shortly after, they had a car accident. This time, Rick was not killed but injured, and he was taken to the hospital. When he opened his eyes, he found that an external blood transfusion had been given, causing him to lose all his powers. This meant that once Rick died, he would not come back to life. Rick then went to his fellow soldiers who had fought with him in the battle. He explained his situation and asked for their help to destroy Omega, but none of the soldiers were willing to help. Just then, Rita arrived, who was an idol for all the soldiers. Upon Rita's request, all the soldiers agreed to assist Rick. They all set out for Omega's location, but upon arriving, they were attacked by numerous alien creatures. The soldiers fought bravely, disregarding their own lives. Eventually, it became clear to Rita that Omega was underwater. She communicated with Rick, who planned to distract the creatures so Rita could kill Omega underwater. However, Rick was badly injured and could barely move, so Rita decided she would distract the aliens while Rick went to kill Omega. Rita quickly fled, and Rick pursued her. He managed to reach the water's edge, but then he heard a loud sound, realizing that Rita had been killed by the aliens. Desperate, Rick jumped into the water. An alien creature, sensing that someone was approaching Omega, went underwater to protect Omega. Rick managed to capture and kill the alien creature, but he also activated numerous grenades, creating a massive explosion that destroyed Omega. In the aftermath, Rick was once again revived with alien blood inside his body and found himself back 2 days in time, to when he was meeting the Colonel for the first time. News reported that the alien creatures were gradually dying due to the explosion, which had been caused by Rita's actions. When Rick returned to the military base where he had spent a lot of good times, he found his soldier friends safe and sound. Rick then went to where Rita used to stay. Seeing Rita made him very happy, though Rita was unaware of Rick's past struggles. And thus, our story ends here.